here's the effect in action. This is a screen recording off my phone with the finished version of the effect. You can see it replaces the cover of the game with this transparent image of Geralt standing in the front, and there's another image kind of a little bit further back in the background that is sort of masked out by the edges of the game case. And you can see that everything sort of parallaxes while you move your phone around. It's really cool, and it's a super simple effect to set up in SparkAR, which I think is a really dope open source, well, not open source, but at least free software that you could get started in right now. So I'm going to show you really quickly how I got this to work. So first of all, started off in Photoshop. Obviously, needed my reference photo of the game case. So I just got this off of Google Images, cropped it a little bit. There was some white space in the background. So I just wanted one nice clean photo of the case. And so basically this is going to be our target image that this effect, which is basically an Instagram filter, is going to be looking for. And so our whole scene and our two image layers and the masking box around them are all going to be based off of the position of this photo of the game case, or the actual game case if you have one in real life. So all I did was I found this transparent image of Geralt that's actually the same one from the case. So if I turn off this target layer, you can see this is just a PNG of Geralt here. I faded in just real sloppily, some color on the bottom to fill it out, kind of like they have going on in the case. And then just for reference, I have the background photo, and this is just another photo that I pulled off of Google Images. You can't see it here in this Photoshop file, but this photo kind of stretches out pretty far in either side, and you'll see that in a second when we go to set up the bounding box. So I saved that photo out. I saved out my transparent version of Geralt, and then I also saved out my cropped version of the target photo, just because I'm going to use that as kind of a reference when we position everything else inside Spark. So I'll go over first actually to Blender, or actually I should say I'll go to Spark and sort of show you how this scene is set up, and then I'll show you why we need to use Blender or any 3D software that you want to use. So over here we have the kind of finished Spark file, and you can see it kind of has the same effect that we saw in the video. We're seeing this kind of what appears to be one flat plane with Geralt at the front, and then this image in the background that's always kind of clipped off right at the edges of our flat sort of portal plane here. But what we can see, if I go in and actually change the material of my bounding box to make it not totally opaque, you can see that what's actually going on here is it's just a light box that I've made. Literally this big kind of trapezoid distorted cube where I've just deleted one side of it, and then everything that we can see in this filter is just what's visible through the opening in that box. And then where all the magic happens is we're just telling the material of this box to basically not render at all in the camera. And since it's, because of the layer structure that we'll set up here, it's gonna mask out anything that's inside of it, including this background image that we have behind Geralt. So when we go back and fix this material so that it's fully transparent, that's basically how we're getting this effect. Where everything's masked out. And if I were to go and actually delete this bounding box geometry, you'd see that there's just this whole unadjusted photo chilling in the background. So the setup is really simple. It's basically just your target image, which you can see kind of peeking out here, your transparent PNG that you want to have kind of at the front of this portal, and then your background image in the back. And everything else is just a single kind of distorted cube, like I said, that's masking it out. So let's go into Blender real quick, and I'll show you how to make this occlusion box that's masking the stuff out. So this is just a default Blender file. I'm using Blender 2.8, which is maybe not the very latest update, but it's recent as of this year. They've totally overhauled the interface. It's dope. Check it out if you're into 3D. I'm gonna go and import, actually I have a plugin here that makes this super easy to bring in my images. So if I hit Shift A to pull up this kind of context menu, Shift A And then I have this plugin installed for Blender called Images as Planes. This is like a super common plugin. There's a lot of easy guides on how to get it set up. It's totally free. Basically what this is going to let me do is go into this folder where I saved out those Photoshop layers. I'm going to tell it, let's see, I want my cover target here. And right now it's inside the cube, but if I pull this out and turn on my rendered view over here, I'm clicking into the rendered camera. It's going to take a second to think, and then we'll see that basically what that plugin does is it allows you to instantly just import a photo, and it will create a rectangular plane and a material with that image texture and just drop it right into your Blender file for you. So it saves you a lot of time just dropping stuff in. So the actual dimensions of this doesn't really matter now, as long as I make sure that I'm referencing like the true size of this target photo that I just brought in. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing, Shift A and Images as Planes to find my backdrop pattern. Import that, and the same deal. Now we can see that I have both of my pictures here. So the first thing I'm going to do is, while I have this backdrop photo selected, I'm going to hit S to scale it up. So I just hit S, and I'm just dragging my mouse a little bit to scale it up. I'm going to kind of see. So for the purposes of what we're doing, that's probably good enough. Basically what I want to make sure is that when I'm looking through the edges of sort of our portal, I'm always going to have something to see, even if I kind of turn my head way over here, or I'm looking down a little bit and I'm looking up. So that's why we kind of want to make sure this background is bigger in all directions than the reference photo, which is going to be like the opening of our portal. So I'm going to make sure there's a little bit of distance between that. Maybe that's probably fine right there. And then stay with me if this just isn't making sense yet, because you'll see how this kind of comes together. Now I'm just going to take this cube right here. While I have it selected, I want to make sure I get rid of this one face so that we have an opening in our occlusion box. So while that's selected, I'm going to hit Tab to go into edit mode. I'm going to click here so that I'm now just working with the faces of the cube. I'm going to click this one face and just hit delete. Actually, I lied. I'm going to right click and then delete that face. So now I have my cube. It's just an open box now, missing that one face side. And I'm going to go now into edge mode actually, so I can grab these edges of the cube independently. And then while I have those selected, that's going to allow me to kind of scale these and like get the dimensions of my box exactly right to fit kind of the edges of our portal here. So with this first set of edges selected, I just have this edge right here and this edge. I'm going to hit my scale tool here. That's going to bring up like the scale controls. And I'm going to really quickly see if I start to like kind of drag these axes here, it's going to scale those two edges in and out. And that's going to allow me to like super quickly just start to adjust the shape of this box and line this up with our photos that we have going on here. So I'm going to go over to my move tool actually because I want this. Okay, so basically just needed to exit edit mode there for a second so I can move this around a little bit easier. So now I'm actually able to grab these arrows here and move this into position before I start really fine tuning it. So I'm going to bring this up right to the edge of our reference photo. And then I'm going to go back into edit mode while I still have this whole object selected by hitting tab. Now I'm going to grab this edge, and now I can scale these guys along this axis. So that looks about right. I'm going to line those up. I'm going to grab these guys again, scale along this axis, and there we go. That's pretty close. So now we have an opening in our shape here, our kind of occlusion box, this thing that's going to mask out everything we want to be hidden. And that opening is now exactly the same size. I'm going to exit edit mode here so I can move this around. It's the same size now as our reference photo, which we have floating here. So I'm going to do the same thing basically for our background photo. I'm going to just make sure that the edges of this box line up with that the same way, and we want to make sure that this ends up kind of fully inside of our bounding box here. So, because we never want to see any of that backdrop photo except for what's peeking out inside the opening. So I'm going to select this. I'm going to hit tab again to go back into edit mode. This time I'm going to take these back two edges. Going to real quickly just start to roughly line that up, just scaling up and down. When I'm ready to like really start fine tuning, I can actually hit this X button. Oh, they actually were pretty. Okay, never mind. We're just gonna keep. And now I'm gonna move again. And we're going to use the move tool to just bring that edge up. So now we're pretty darn close. So now we can see like when it's right here, our photo is actually inside of the box. For the most part, can actually see that there's a little bit, I think, coming out on the edges here. So let's just do a little bit more scaling out that way, and now it looks like our background photo is safely inside the box. So this is going to mask out everything that we needed to mask out, and we have our reference photo here. Everything is looking good. So I'm going to exit edit mode, and basically the only thing that we need in this scene to bring into Spark is going to be the actual background box. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to delete out our target photo. So we're just using that for reference. Theoretically, I could also make this this kind of background image panel part of this export that we bring into Spark, but just because of the way that Spark sometimes handles materials and image textures, I'm just going to use that as a regular image in Spark. So we'll set that up later on. So I'm actually going to also delete that out of the scene. So all that we're going to bring over is our custom shaped box, which is open on only one side. So I'm going to go over here. I'm going to export this. You can use either FBX or OBJ. Spark might accept even a couple other options, but FBX I find is the best in just the filters that I've made for kind of bringing over and packaging up everything in Blender, especially if you've made custom materials, which we haven't in this case yet, but I like to use FBX. So I'm going to export that real quick. And now we have our FBX that we've exported here. So back in Spark, I'm just going to undo what I've done here. I'm going to actually make a new filter so I can show you guys how to start from scratch. And the first thing we want to do is set up our image tracking. So I'm going to hit add object, and I want a fixed target tracker. Insert that, and the first thing we need to do is choose a file. So I'm going to choose that for my same assets folder. In this case, it's going to be our target photo, the cover. So this means that every time someone loads this filter and uses it, it's going to be looking for this reference photo, and it's going to use that as sort of the origin point of the entire 3D scene that we're going to make. So next thing we need to do is go over here and add an asset. So we're going to import from computer, and we're just going to go and find the same FBX that we just made. So I think this was a super helpful title of Untitled. And then open that, and so nothing's changed in our scene. It's just showed up in our assets folder down here. This kind of cube icon thing inside of it is the geometry itself. So we're going to go and drag that into our scene right on top of the image tracker, meaning that this geometry now in the scene is always going to reference its parent object, which is the target tracker, our photo. So I'm going to take this guy real quickly. I'm realizing I just need to rotate it around. So I'm going to do a negative 90-degree rotation while it's selected. And now we just need to, we're actually almost there. So now we just are going to need to use the kind of rotational and movement controls in Spark to get this guy into place. Just going to kind of, once we start building it, realizing need to scale it up a little bit, so I'm going to use the scale tool. Yeah, if I grab here, it'll do the whole thing. And we're kind of just gradually getting into place and knowing that we need everything to kind of line up with our origin photo. So we're getting there. Looks like I just need to, it's pretty much centered now. I just need to scale it up a little bit more. Not that much. And see, I could have helped myself out by in Blender making the origin point of this object actually the center of its geometry. That would make this a little bit easier, but we'll get there. And honestly, for the sake of this, it doesn't have to be perfect. I'll link my original finished file that you saw at the start of this vid in the description of this video, and can use that one for reference. This one we're kind of just using to quickly show you how to get it started. Back up there, okay. That's pretty much in position. So now we have our basically occlusion box, is what I'm calling it, since it's going to occlude out all the objects we don't want to see in position. We just need to bring in our backdrop photo. And also actually our Geralt photo that's going to replace the real cover of the game here. So I'm going to go ahead and add another object, this time just a plane that we're going to apply these images to. And so here we have our plane. I'm going to use the movement controls again to kind of line this up. You can tell when it kind of like gets all wonky for a second that it's kind of right clipping into this other photo, so we want it basically right when it's right there. I guess if we want to be safe, we'll have it a little bit in front of it. We're going to use the scale tools again, and this time we're just going to drag this guy so that it is the same height and width of our reference photo. And then in this plane object here, while we have it selected, I'm going to go over to where it says materials, click this plus sign, create a new material, and I just double clicked on it there. If I double click over here, I'm just going to name it something helpful like Geralt. Now all we have to do is choose a file here for its image texture. It's going to be in the same place we kept everything else. And we'll load in our PNG. And now you can see that's been applied to our plane, and it's chilling right on top of the source, which is the cover of the game. So now we're going to do the same thing that we just did there to bring our backdrop photo in. And also we're going to need to drag this plane into, this also needs to be a child of our face tracker. Okay, so now we're going to do the exact same thing to bring in the background photo. I'm just going to go in, add another plane, insert that, and we're going to need to do the same thing. So we're going to make sure this is, so drag it back here. I want this to be the same dimensions approximately as the back of this box. And I'm going to also drag that to be a child of our face tracker. I'm just going to drag it on top of it to make sure, there we go. So now I'm going to use the scale tools again. Same deal. Make sure it's the approximate width and height. Just eyeballing it for right now until we get a little bit closer. Back to the move. Oh yeah, it's not big enough at all. Just gonna kind of uniformly scale it, and that's pretty close. Don't want to take up any more of your precious time. So that'll be good enough for right now. So now we know that, oh, no, it won't. Let's just scale that in on the sides a little bit. Boom. And we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to find our background plane here, which, just to make this simple, I'm going to call this just BG. Again, we're going to go add a material, and this one we're going to name background. And again, I'm going to choose a file, backdrop photo. And you can kind of see it now here behind our reference photo, which actually, if I go and select our tracker, I can turn off by saying this is not going to be visible. But actually, I think in this case, oh, okay, I forgot to do one thing actually, which was when I dragged our image, our kind of replacement Geralt into here and made it a child of the face tracker, it kind of reset its origin point. So I just need to drag this back up. And now kind of the trick here is that when things are on top of each other in the layer structure, it affects how kind of transparent materials get rendered. So you can see that if our replacement Geralt is sort of on top of the tracker in the layer structure, it will occlude it and kind of mask it out, which is what we want to happen. But we also want to be able to see the background, so we need to make sure that the background is actually behind Geralt here. So now we have, just because, so if anything is kind of looking screwed up, just kind of and when you're using transparent textures and materials, sometimes you just need to finesse the layer structure a little bit, because that will change kind of the render order and will prevent things from getting masked out when you don't want them to be. So now the last thing for us to do here is select our bounding box, which is this cube icon geometry here. And the same way we did for our planes, we're going to want to go in and see where this thing's material is defined. So we might actually need to click down, to the cube here. And I'm going to double click on this to highlight it over here. I'm going to rename this occluder, if that's possible. Okay, maybe not. I'm going to make a new material so we have control over this. Double click here, and now I'll call this occluder. And basically all we need to do here is tell this to be a flat shader and for its opacity to be 0. And that's pretty much our whole scene set up. So you can see this is kind of shitty. I could have taken a little bit more time, like I did the first time around, to actually mask this off properly. But if you build out this scene, and you can use kind of whatever image editing software you want, whatever 3D software you want. I just prefer Blender because it's totally free, just like Spark. You'll be able to upload this to your phone with this kind of layer structure. And again, make sure that all of these elements are children of the target tracker. Otherwise, they're just going to be kind of sitting there no matter where your reference photo is. So make sure you have that up as a child of this element, and everything should be working for you. And kind of like we saw at the beginning, your final result should look something like this, where the background panel kind of parallaxes super smoothly with the camera perspective, and you're able to get this really nice effect. You could totally apply this to like a poster or something, a venue, kind of events or things like that. a poster, event, signage, your business, I don't know, coffee shop or something, a menu on the wall, I don't even know. There's a ton of applications for this. I'm definitely going to keep using Spark for this kind of stuff and keep exploring it. Sorry if I'm rambling on in this tutorial, but let me know if you want to see any other projects or walkthroughs with Spark. I'd be happy to try to work something out for you. Thanks.